Thank you for joining me for Storytime with Tanya as we explore today's story called The Silence Beneath the Pines. The last time Shera, Vanessa, and Martha were all in the same room, they were barely 20, wild, ambitious, and inseparable, until Angie vanished. 21 years had passed since that night. Now, they were three different women, carrying the weight of life's storms. Shera drove up to the Catskills from Brooklyn, the finality of her divorce papers still crisp in her glove box. She was a social worker now, passionate and burned out in equal measure, living in a rent-stabilized apartment that still smelled like her ex-husband's cologne. Vanessa arrived from Manhattan in a sleek rented Audi, her designer weekender bag clashing with the rustic charm of the cabin. She was a successful internist with a Rolodex of dating app matches and an empty king-size bed. Martha greeted them at the front steps, bundled in a thick wool cardigan, her brown curls streaked with silver. She had organized the trip, insisted on it. Her house in New Rochelle was full of laughter and Legos, but her eyes betrayed her restlessness. Her husband was kind. Her kids were loud. Yet she often found herself staring out the kitchen window, lost in thought. The cabin was old but comfortable. Pinewood floors, a fireplace Vanessa struggled to light. Over the first evening, the air filled with wine-soaked laughter and old stories. They talked about college crushes, career detours, parenting nightmares, and the ridiculous email chain that started this reunion. But by the second night, a storm rolled in, fat raindrops hitting the roof like whispered confessions. It was after the second bottle of wine, sometime after midnight, when Shera brought up Angie. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked in a low voice. "I still see her sometimes, in crowds, on the subway. It's like a ghost." Vanessa poured herself more wine, hands slightly unsteady. "We were kids, and she was just gone." Martha didn't speak. Her eyes were fixed on the fire. Shera leaned forward. "You were the last one to see her that night, weren't you?" Martha flinched. "We were all at the bonfire, remember?" "But after," Vanessa said. Her doctor's voice was soft, clinical. "She left with you." There was a silence, thick, charged. Martha set her glass down and stood. "It was 21 years ago." "You've been carrying something," Shera said. "We know you have. Just say it, Martha, please." Rain battered the windows. The fire popped and hissed. Martha looked at her friends. "If I tell you, it stays between us. Angie asked for that." When they nodded, Martha sat back down, her face pale. "She came to me that night. She told me everything. Her father, he'd been abusing her for years, but no one believed her. Not her mother, not the police. He was a goddamn congressman. Everyone called her trouble, dramatic. But I saw the bruises." Shera covered her mouth, and Vanessa went stiff. "She begged me to help her disappear. Said she couldn't take it anymore. She had money, A burner phone? A plan? All she needed was a ride to the train station. You helped her? Vanessa whispered. I drove her to Poughkeepsie. She boarded a train under a different name, and I waited until it left. And then I drove back and said nothing. The cops never suspected me, and I just told them she wandered off at the bonfire. Jesus, Shera breathed. I thought she'd call, Martha continued, her eyes glistening. But she never did. I didn't even know if she made it. Maybe she's starting over, maybe she's dead, but I kept her secret because she asked me to. The storm outside seemed to pause as if the forest itself was listening. I thought about telling you both 100 times, Martha said, her voice breaking. But I didn't want to betray her, and I didn't want to lose you. Shera moved closer and took her hand. You didn't lose us, she said gently. Vanessa nodded, her eyes wet. You saved her. They stayed like that, 3 women stitched together by shared youth, grief, and now a long-buried truth. The storm passed in the early hours. In the quiet that followed, they built the fire again, not for warmth, but to keep the darkness away just a little longer. And somewhere far from the Catskills, maybe a woman named Angie, no longer a girl, no longer afraid, felt a peace she hadn't known in years. It had been 3 months since the stormy weekend in the Catskills, since Martha had spoken Angie's name out loud for the first time in 2 decades. Life resumed in scattered pieces. Shera threw herself into her caseload. Vanessa juggled 12-hour shifts and the unease of rediscovered memories, and Martha watched the news more than usual, sensing the shape of something approaching. And then one morning it happened. Angie Jones appeared on every screen in America. The live broadcast from the Capitol showed a woman, composed but weary, sitting before a panel of congressional investigators. Her long auburn hair was tied back, streaks of gray at the temples. She wore a navy suit, no makeup. Her nameplate didn't read Angela Jones. It read Claire Mendez. But those who knew her saw past the name. Her voice was strong and steady as she began. My name is Angela Jones. I was born in 1983. I am the daughter of Congressman Michael Jones. For over a decade, I lived under a different name. I disappeared in 2004 with the help of a friend because I feared for my life. Today, I testify not only as a survivor of abuse, but as a witness to crimes committed by my father and his associates. The room fell silent. America held its breath. She told them everything about the backroom deals, the threats, the violence behind closed doors, about the abuse, how she tried to speak up, only to be discredited, how she escaped, changed her name, and worked as a paralegal under the radar in Arizona, just waiting for the moment when she could finally tell the truth and not be silenced. Shera watched it from her Brooklyn apartment, tears streaming down her face. Vanessa stood still in the hallway of Mount Sinai Hospital, transfixed by a muted television. Martha sobbed silently in her kitchen, her hands trembling around a coffee mug. By the end of Angie's testimony, Michael Jones was no longer a man of power. He was a predator, stripped of protection, cornered by the truth his daughter had carried in exile. 2 days later, a private message came, encrypted, untraceable, sent to each of them. Suite 1705 at the Plaza. One night, no questions, no press. A. They arrived one by one. Shera wore a worn denim jacket and no makeup. Vanessa arrived straight from work, still in scrubs, hair tied back. Martha came in a long camel coat, clutching a photo of the four of them from college. The suite was elegant and quiet, dimly lit by chandeliers and the golden glow of New York's skyline beyond the windows. Angie was there waiting. She looked older, thinner, but her eyes held the same fierce spark. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Shera crossed the room and hugged her so tightly it broke whatever invisible barrier remained. They cried, laughed, drank champagne that Vanessa insisted they open. "Did you see the way those senators looked when you named names?" Vanessa said, grinning. "You've got more than all of Washington combined. Come on, you disappeared for 20 years and reappeared to take down a goddamn congressman," Shera added. "You are a legend." Angie smiled, but there was a heaviness to it. "I never wanted to be," she said softly. "I just wanted to be safe." Martha handed her the photo. Angie stared at it, four girls on a beach, arms around each other, wild and unbroken. "You saved me," Angie said, her voice breaking. You all did, in different ways." They stayed up for hours, talking about everything and nothing, how time had stretched them apart and still tied them together. When dawn approached, Angie stood. "I have to go. There's a safe house waiting. They're relocating me again. New identity. Again." "Will we ever see you again?" Shera asked. "I don't know." Martha stepped forward and hugged her first, whispering something in her ear that made Angie close her eyes. Vanessa pressed a hand to her shoulder. "Wherever you are, just know you're not alone." Shera, last to go, simply said, "You found your voice. That's what matters." Angie smiled one last time. "So did you." She slipped out before sunrise, disappearing like mist off the Hudson. They never saw her again. But sometimes, when the wind shifts through the city streets or a woman at a bus stop looks too familiar, they pause, remember, wonder. And in that suite, tucked between silk drapes and half-finished champagne flutes, three women stood in the quiet after they'd finally laid a ghost to rest. Thank you for joining me for another story time with Tanya for this story called Silence Beneath the Pines.